Femi, okay. On November the 6th, the world's biggest climate conference kicks off in Egypt. It is hosted by an African nation, which means that Africa's priorities for the UN climate conference, well, they should be front and centre. And that is our discussion for today's stream.
We are suffering. We rely on livestock for our livelihood, but you can see that because of the drought, the cows are dying, and some are unable to stay on their feet. We are now unable to take care of our children.
We used to farm and harvest crops to feed our children before the drought affected us. Then after the rain failed, we moved to Mogadishu a week ago, and now we are settled at a makeshift camp not far from here.
People in conflict zones are fighting over land and water. If natural resources were available everywhere, there wouldn't be any conflict. But when there is scarcity, there's conflict. And the reason for said scarcity is climate change.
So many challenges for different regions around the African continent. How will they be attacked? How will they be handled? Wanjira, Othman, Hamira, so good to have you here as we do a curtain raiser for what is being known as Africa COP. That's a lot of pressure for Sharm El-Sheikh and Egypt. Let's see if they can live up to that pressure. Wanjira, so good to have you here on the stream. Please say hello to our viewers around the world. Tell them who you are, what you do.
Hi, Femi. Thanks for having me. Wanjira Mathai, I'm Managing Director for Africa and Global Partnerships at the World Resources Institute.
Good to have you. Othman, nice to see you here on the stream. Welcome. Please say hello to our viewers around the world. Tell them who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'm Sharm El-Sheikh, Head of Egyptian Association of Sustainable Development, which is non-governmental organization, and also I'm climate adaptation expert in the field of agriculture, especially in Upper Egypt, I mean Luxor area.
Good to have you. Hamira, welcome to the stream. Nice to have you. Tell us about what you do, who you are, the expertise you're bringing to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Femi. My name is Hamira Kobsinje, and I'm a climate justice activist from Uganda. I'm also the co-founder of Climate Justice Africa, and in Climate Justice Africa, we deal with sharing skills on adaptation, on how to survive the climate crisis, and also, much as the climate crisis and climate change have their own terms allocated to them, so many of us, for example, from my country, we actually are self-taught. All the activists are self-taught. So I try to break down climate change and the climate crisis and what we are facing to our daily lives for my people and also for activists on the continent. And I have done that since January this year. And we are progressing so far in
Hamira,
years.
That was an awesome, epic introduction. I hope you can deliver on all of those promises. All right. It sounds like COP already. Can we deliver on what we promise? All right. So if you are joining the conversation, you're live right now. The comment section is here. I know you have things to say about climate change, climate action across the African continent. What is needed when countries from around the world are getting together to talk? What do they need to talk about? Wanjira, Othman, Hamira, there are conversations that happen within COP, and there are conversations that happen outside. The exciting ones are the ones that happen outside. We're going to have the outside conversation. The priority for you, Wanjira, for the constituency that you represent, what is the most important job that has to get done in Egypt?
In Egypt, we need to reaffirm our commitment to deliver. It's about implementation. Several commitments were made in COP26, commitments that have been broken one after the other. So this is the COP to reestablish trust. This is the COP to demonstrate accountability on finance for climate adaptation, on finance for loss and damage, and of course on delivering on ambitious mitigation targets. Last COP, we agreed to come back to this COP with stronger mitigation agendas to reduce emissions, especially the wealthiest countries of the world. Those are the three key things we'll be looking out for.
Othman, I'm just wondering what happens at these gatherings where people promise so much. We're going to make sure that we don't cut down any more rainforest. We're going to give you so many billions, and then it doesn't happen. Do people just get high on their own company? What happens?
Yeah, what I would like to say here that I'm talking, let's say, on behalf of smallholder farmer in Upper Egypt or sometimes in Africa. All farmers suffering from climate change. I would like to introduce a little bit about the difference between climate adaptation and the climate mitigation. We are here in Africa. That we did not contribute more than 3% of total emissions in comparison of all the global emissions. So when we talk about climate change in Africa, we should focus on adaptation, not mitigation. Mitigation is costly for smallholder farmer or small poor people. Mitigation is very important. The idea of climate change is very complicated for all people. We are in the Egyptian Association for Sustainable Development. We try to introduce the idea of climate change and the climate adaptation in simple way, like comic theater. Comic theater can introduce this complicated idea in simple way. So it will be very important if we create a bridge between different countries, developing countries from side and the developed countries from other side.
Okay.
This bridge will transfer the climate adaptation knowledge.
All right, Othman, I feel that Hamira wants to have a chat with you. Hamira, go ahead.
No, I was listening to Othman talk about adaptation, and it makes so much sense what he just said. And I'm thinking that most of us in the global south have gone past adaptation, and now we're like at loss and damage reparations, and we actually need to receive compensation from this COP27. And starting from, sorry, I took over, Osman, but what I wanted to say is COP27 should be focusing on 3 keys, and that is reduction of emissions, helping countries to prepare for and dealing with the climate breakdown and the breakdown that we are facing right now already. For example, they didn't show my country, but my country has lost close to like 4,000 people to the climate-induced crisis, and just because of flooding, famine, and landslides. And so we need to also secure technical support for developing countries. So to address this, we need to receive climate finance, a loss and damage reparation, and a mechanism on payment, on how payment is going to be made.
Hamira, I see you have your list ready for COP27. There's something that I want to do, and that is that earlier this year, I was at the United Nations Environment Programme anniversary for 50 years. They've been in existence for 50 years, and they were looking ahead to what the next 50 years might look like for the Earth. In a discussion, I was with a climate activist known as Vanessa Nakate, and Vanessa did something really interesting. She talked to the ministers in the room, and there were lots of very high-level ministers in the room, and she asked them a question. I feel that Vanessa sums up perfectly what you, Anjira, Othman, and Hamira have been talking about, but Vanessa put the ministers on the spot. Have a look at my laptop. Let's see what happened.
Especially the ministers from the global north. Do you think that the people who are least responsible for the climate crisis and the ones who are suffering some of the worst impacts of this crisis deserve our help? Thumbs up. Higher up. So all of you believe that the people who are suffering right now deserve our help. So I'll ask a second question. Will your countries commit to putting money and funding loss and damage for those countries at COP27? Now that's where the problem is. My first question is like your statements. You're promising us. You're talking about what you're going to do. And my second question is about real action. Loss and damage is happening right now. We can't adapt to the loss of our cultures, the loss of our identities, the loss of our histories. We can't adapt to extinction or to starvation. We cannot adapt to loss and damage.
So Vanessa put the ministers on the spot, but I'm not sure that in Egypt in a week's time that the money will be there. Wanjira, how do you get the money for the global south and the developing world that is suffering right now? There are droughts, there are floods, people are having trouble getting to work, the climate is intense in a lot of the different regions around Africa. How does the money turn up? Will it turn up?
Well, the money should turn up, Femi. So that's obviously not the question. When we needed money, especially in the global north, to shore up economies after COVID, money turned up in the trillions, not even in the billions, in the trillions. So this is about empathy. It's about solidarity. One of my really dear colleagues, Anuraba Ghosh, just recently said something that hit it right on the spot. He said, we are living in unempathetic times. This is what it's about, because the commitment, everybody knows what needs to be done, and that's why Vanessa's exercise was so powerful. That activity demonstrating that we know exactly what we need to do, but we're living in unempathetic times and have created essentially parallel sets of facts. And in a funny way, they coexist. We saw it in that room full of ministers who know very well what to do. So this lack of empathy is something I hope we can crack through. I expect climate activists, civil society, and that's why what you said, Femi, about the outside is so important. It's about making sure that the energy and the sense of urgency makes it to the inner sanctum of those negotiating rooms. Because in those negotiating rooms, they're negotiating commas and full stops. They do not have the heart and the empathy and that is required at that moment to make those decisions. It's not about the money not being there. Of course the money is there.
Often, what will you be able to do? What will you be able to achieve for the smallholder farmers that you represent?
Yeah, what I would like to add here, it's not only the matter of money. I mean here, it can be also knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer from developed country to developing country can support to face the negative effect of climate change, especially for those smallholder farmers in Africa. I know that technology and the knowledge transfer is also meaning money, but I think developed country can support by technology, and it will be more, welcomed from developed country rather than the money or the cash, especially in this situation that facing all the world. So transfer technology and knowledge, I mean here improved seeds, improved technologies of agriculture machineries, irrigation technology to reduce the negative effect of water scarcity, especially in eastern part of Africa. There are a lot of technology that can support and can help a smallholder farmer, and develop the country can help through, let's say, academia, through private sector,
right,
through public-private partnership.
So often, so maybe it's not just about money, it's about bring us your experts, your engineers, so that you may have this in the developing world and you've got tech, and maybe because you are impacting the global south, then you can give us knowledge. Amira, go ahead.
Yes, but I would also think that as they bring us the experts and whatever they are giving us, is they shouldn't be exploiting us, because what the global north is doing right now is putting everything, doing everything that is going to benefit them the most. When it comes to,
for example,
Amira. For example, when it comes to closing up coal wells, when it comes to closing up oil wells, they are doing their best and they are trying to show they are working. For example, a few weeks back, there was a sanction on the eco pipeline, of course, which I'm not supporting and I'm against, but the global north finds it very easy to put pressure on the global south and shift all the hard times and the production of raw materials to us, and they benefit from the finished goods, and of which the profit, they take the finished produce, they take everything, and we are suffering. So like Wangari said, there is a lot of money. The banks have spent 4.6 trillion.
Okay.
All
right, so our audience wants to talk to you as well, Hamira. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. All right, so Joseph is on YouTube. Othman, hold tight for one moment. I'm going to share the conversation with our viewers right now. Bishop Joseph is on YouTube. Over 200 elephants, thousands of domestic animals like cows and goats have died within a few months in Kenya because of the drought. More testimony from our viewers. Anita says, I'm in Nigeria, the floods are affecting the low-lying states. This is interesting from Peter. Mitigation and adaptation are two sides of the coin. People in Africa are doing great work with water harvesting projects. Wanjira, thoughts about positive projects that are working in different parts of the continent?
Absolutely. There's several bright spots that need to be amplified, that need to be expanded and grown. You mentioned water harvesting. We need to work on irrigation and technology that allows for us to continue to produce food at times when the rains have failed like now. We need to be able to harvest water in places where we now see not only human suffering, but wildlife and livestock. So people are losing their livelihoods, and of course wildlife are losing their lives. This is a huge challenge, and that's why building adaptive capacity is so important. This is why we have to invest in all the technologies, including solar. One of the things that we are seeing, Femi, is that young people on the African continent are innovating like never before. Solar technologies are on the rise. Financial technologies and how to transfer small amounts of money to the farthest reaches. We are ready for investment. What's missing is the resources to invest in these entrepreneurs. So we do have an issue at the moment of finance.
All right, so let me bring in Mo Ibrahim. He is the head of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and he addressed that issue about finance. Where is the money going to come from? This is what he told us a couple of hours ago.
Unfortunately, there is very little movement from side of the polluters. They think of the contribution or the pledges they make as a charity, and that's a problem. The only way forward really is to let the market play its role here, and we must have a global carbon pricing.
One of many ideas I'm sure will be discussed at COP27 in the next couple of days. There is something that I really have to talk about, and that is the activism that surrounds the UN Climate Conference always. And there has been problems with activists trying to get to Egypt to be part of COP27. We spoke to a number who had very similar issues with trying to actually just physically get into the country. This is what they told us.
It has been a hassle trying to get to COP this year. And one of the biggest challenges has been getting badges, as every request for a badge has been met with responses like there are limited badges available, and the process has been really tedious.
I personally had to go through some processes to get my badge, but there are many activists out there who don't have this privilege. And I hope that COP27 will be well inclusive.
Logistics should not be a barrier, and Egyptian authorities should try and subsidize some of the basic needs of those attending COPs. Youth activists attending COPs should be given attention and be included in most of the strategic decisions that will be taken at COP27.
So these are the headlines that we're seeing in the last few days. Egyptian security arrests dozens ahead of COP27 Climate Summit Rights Group. I can't say enough how much protest activism is part of the essence of COP. What happens outside influences what happens inside. What happens inside influences what happens outside. Hey, Mira, are you going to COP27?
Yes, I was able to secure last-minute funding, and of course, it's still half funded. It's not yet fully funded, so I'll still have issues in Egypt. But like the activists earlier said, we have been having problems. I personally have been working on the budget allocation group and on the working group with activists on the continent, and we have had issues. Of course, there was very few budgets allocated, and then there is very limited funding, and we have had so many major polluters. For example, we saw that the UK, who are actually major polluters, and also the ones holding the climate hosting for COP27 for last year, are actually not showing up. So we're having issues like that. And when we have major polluters like that not showing up to COP, we have funders not actually availing funds for activists to be there.
The Prime Minister of the UK isn't going, but I suspect that they will be sending a delegation. They have to send a delegation. Let me just ask you this, Othman. We had a number of Egyptian guests who we were delighted to have as part of this conversation, and they all felt very uncomfortable about talking about Egypt as the host and the challenges they have regarding human rights, regarding being very comfortable with activists. What can you tell us about that?
I'm talking from the side of farmers. And as a farmer, I would like to encourage the African diplomatics and the Egyptian representative in COP27 to focus on climate adaptation and to find a way to support the climate adaptation solution, maybe by fund or knowledge transfer from developed countries.
Diplomatic
this is very
answer,
important.
Othman, that was a very diplomatic answer. You came with a mission and you stuck to your mission. This is, though, uncomfortable, Wanjira, isn't it, for when you put your hopes and you're hosting as a continent. It's not just Egypt hosting, it's the continent hosting, and you get uncomfortable, difficult headlines that you have to wrestle with. Similar headlines for Glasgow for last year's COP as well, about security, not being able to get in, long lines, the UK government doing one thing and then saying another thing. It's not unusual, but I think when the continent needs so much in terms of collaboration, it's disappointing, is it not?
Well, it is. I mean, I think that there are several issues that could be considered problematic. One is the location itself. I have to say, everybody's having a problem getting badges. And of course, it's extremely expensive to go to Sharm El-Sheikh. So I think the location, if they had asked me and they didn't, I would have picked Cairo even, because I think that it needed to be in a place that's more accessible, that's not exclusive. And that is part of the challenge, is the location itself. Of course, it's a beautiful place, and Egypt is going to be a wonderful host, but I think that is problematic. The other thing is, I don't think it serves Egypt well to have all these bad headlines. So I'm sure, in the spirit of what COP has always been, climate activists will be there. I know the Wangari Maathai Foundation, for example, has worked together through their hub to get something like 35 activists there. So they will be there, and they will definitely make themselves heard. I don't think Egypt will be trying to get on the headlines in that way at COP. I believe COP will happen. Civil society will be present, and there will be a strong contingent of youth. Climate and environment, Femi, are also human rights issues. So we must lump them all together. We must remember that we cannot exclude Egypt and talk about human rights and climate and environment elsewhere. We have to take the problem wherever it is, including to Egypt.
All right, Wanjira and Othman and Hamira. Wanjira had the last word, Hamira, for now. But we know we will be following you and Othman and Wanjira and your experiences of COP27, so that we can learn from your experiences, and hopefully Africa's priorities at COP27 will be addressed. Thank you on YouTube for your comments and questions. Always appreciate them. I'm Femi Oke, signing off from this episode of The Stream. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.